Good morning, I'm April. I'm Megan, our participant.
Excellent, and Nick Brown is back there too from our IT. He helps us problem solve day in and day out. Thank you, Community Impact Team and beyond. This is the team that can help answer any questions that you have as you move through the application and then just in general here at Greater Twin Cities United Way. We are joined by close to 80 people via webinar today. So if you have questions as we move through the presentation, folks will be coming around with a microphone. Otherwise, they won't be able to hear you online. So if you could just be patient with us, raise your hand, we'll bring a mic around so that you can ask any questions that you might have. The objective today is to really understand United Way, to go through the request for proposals that we have in Safety Net to understand the process and timeline. The team will then walk through the core expectations and guidelines that are mapped out within the RFP, and then we will go through the online application process. You'll hear this over and over today, but please start your application sooner rather than later so that we don't have any technology bumps along the way. If any of you are like me, I often have technology bumps along the way, so start earlier rather than later. And then just to get a quick sense of folks in the room, how many people are currently funded by Greater Twin Cities United Way? Any newbies in the room? Excellent, welcome, glad to see you guys. So we're here to help navigate the process, so if you have questions, again, please do reach out. In the past, we've pretty much released an RFP, and then you're all on your own to figure it out. We actually really want to talk about the questions that you have along the way to make sure that you're successful in this round. Our mission and values at United Way, we are focused on uniting caring people to build pathways out of poverty, thereby improving individual lives and the community. We do this in partnership with our companies, with our individual donors, with our nonprofit sector. It's a nice kind of trifecta of folks who help support the work of United Way. We are only as strong as our community partners, so the work that all of you do day in and day out really lend towards that impact and the results that we hope to achieve. So that's a critical piece of the work that we do with our mission. Our values are accountability, inclusiveness, innovation, and integrity. Our approach in terms of the money that we raise in the community and then ultimately invest in the programs, you'll see are these three different approaches. The bottom level here, the multi-year grant making, that's really the credibility, the foundation of our work here at United Way. 80% of the funds that we raise go into our multi-year grants. So not only in the safety net area that we're funding and that we're talking about today, but also in education and jobs. That's really the important base that we provide within the community that will continue to remain a key priority at United Way. Over the past 5 years, we've also begun to really invest in strategic partnerships and coalitions. So many of you sit at coalitions around issues related to hunger or to homelessness. United Way plays a role in those coalitions as well because we see that as a critical factor to success around some of these key community issues. And then increasingly, we're playing a role in systems change and innovation. And this really relates to policy in two areas, one in education and then one in jobs and training as well. So we've really put our efforts and our energy into those different areas to really start moving the needle for children in the early learning arena and then also within the job space for adults. And you'll see more about that. We'll be spending some time over the next 18 months really assessing where we play a critical role within that systems change and innovation work. You'll see as part of this RFP, we invest our funds in the 9-county region, and that's laid out fairly clearly within the guidelines. So you'll see that. We think that there are a lot of great needs statewide, of course, but this is the scope of Greater Twin Cities United Way. There are 36 United Ways, believe it or not, in the state of Minnesota and 1,600 nationally, and so we play a critical role within this 9-county region, and that's where our investments go. The safety net ecosystem, this really captures what we're thinking about through our goals in the safety net. So really moving people out of poverty through the different foundational stability areas, providing access to resources, and then ultimately leading to self-efficacy. So this is what you saw laid out within the concept paper. This is really what we're focused on through the RFP that you'll see clearly articulated. This is what the team will talk about today within each of the goal areas as well. So the safety net investment strategy, we wanted to make sure that, and this is new, that we created a comprehensive plan that focused on individuals and families. In the past, for those of you that are familiar with United Way funding, we would release an RFP spaced out over time in very specific content areas. So we'd roll out housing one year, we'd roll out hunger the next year. This is a comprehensive plan to get at all of the work that we're doing in the safety net. It also includes our work in health, which is new this year. So we've done this also in education so that we're having a comprehensive approach and strategy related to the work, and hopefully reflects the work that you're doing in the community. So instead of having a fragmented approach around individual content areas, it's really, again, about that individual or about that family that you're working with. I will turn it over to Megan OMeara, and I will say about Megan also, which I failed to mention in the beginning. Megan has been at United Way since January and recently promoted into the Director of Safety Net role after a pretty comprehensive search for this. Megan will be overseeing all of the goal areas that we'll talk about today. She brings a ton of expertise to this arena, and we're really pleased to have. Has done a lot of work in communities in not only Minneapolis and Minnesota, but also in San Francisco and New York. So we're really excited to have you as part of the team, Megan, and at the helm of the Safety Net RFP.
Thank you. Good morning. Hello, hello. All right. So this graphic really represents our conceptualization of the safety net. You know, for us, this is about United Way using funding and our partnerships with you as on-the-ground providers to provide resources and access to services to improve foundational stability and help create our self-efficacy to overcome obstacles and get people stable. And so you'll see, you'll see the 5 goal areas that sort of dig it out from, sorry guys. So you'll see the 5 goal areas that sort of stick it out from that vision. And then underneath we have our United Way 211, which is really about connecting people to services. And you'll also see legal services, which traditionally has been embedded in each of these goal areas. But this round, we're really pulling that out and looking at legal aid as sort of a support across all the goal areas. And for organizations where that is applicable, I'll talk a little bit about that. I'll talk more about that later. Okay, so the real reason you're here, what is going to happen over the next 6 weeks and 6 months? So first, I'm not going to get into the weeds here on organizational eligibility, but I'll just say read page 45 and page 46 of the RFP before you do anything else. Just please make sure that your organization fits within sort of the key eligibility requirements for this RFP. In terms of program eligibility, so the program you're applying for, I will again say please read carefully in the RFP. I'll say that a lot today. But the 3 sort of key eligibility pieces that we're looking for in terms of programs we fund is, number 1, that you are focused on people who are at 200, individuals or families at 200% of poverty or below. That's really the population that United Way is focused on having an impact on. I'm going to talk a little bit about, there's some slight exceptions around there that I'll get into details on later, but in general, that is where your program should focus in terms of people that it is serving. As Megan said, services within the 9-county area, that is our region, and that's where we're looking, again, to have an impact. For those of you that are serving in multiple counties, as long as you have a program site and services within one of these counties, your program is eligible. And then lastly, you know, we're really looking at programs who have had at least 2 years of operational experience. That's sort of the threshold for us here at United Way to sort of mark a program as eligible. Again, no slight exception in the health arena that I'll talk a little bit about later. But in general, that's sort of what we're looking for in terms of experience. So many of you, I hope, saw the concept paper that came out about 4 months ago. We received really great feedback from the community. We got a lot of online comments. We held some focus groups to understand is what we're putting out there in line with what you're seeing on the ground. And I'm happy to say we got a lot of yeses. Yes, it is. We heard comments and we heard requests for changes. We made those changes where appropriate and where it made sense. So I will say overall, I would say there's no material or major changes between the concept paper that came out 4 months ago and what you're looking at now. We did a lot of clarifying where we could, especially around outcomes, indicators, and measurements. So, you know, if you're rereading your section after reading it 4 months ago, you may hopefully see some clarity, some tweaks, hopefully for the better. The one thing I will point out, and this is a little bit of a technical thing, but in the original concept paper, there was language around only one application will be accepted per goal area. So for example, if you are in Independence area and you are used to submitting 3 applications for 3 different strategies, the concept paper from months ago said you only can do 1. We've loosened that up, so that is not a hard and fast anymore. The program managers will talk about, managers will talk a little bit about more what they want to see. In general, we're hoping that folks are able to think about the strategies in each goal area in a more holistic way and pull that into one application. We're not doing what we used to do in the past, which is sort of fund by strategy when we don't have to. So that's all to say, you're not prohibited from putting more than one application in, but in general, we would like to see 1 application from your organization per goal area. Any questions on that? No, okay. So this is really the meat of the RFP, and I'm not going to go through it for each goal area, but I'll just say this is the important stuff. So please make sure you and your team are really clear on what the core expectations are for all grantees, but you're really sort of digging into what the preferred approach and what the outcomes and indicators are for the program, because where the application sort of lives or dies is how well it is able to connect the strategies and the program services to the outcomes, because the outcomes are where we are looking to see impact, and we need to see that connection. So that's, I can't stress that strongly enough. I'll probably say it a few more times throughout this presentation, but this is the sweet spot for this RFP. All right, I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Naima Khan, who's going to talk a little bit more about housing.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here, and welcome again. My name is Naima, and I'm here to provide you some guidance for housing programs that are planning to apply. So in the upcoming funding round, United Way is not going to be funding market rate rehousing programs in the housing area. So just want to make it clear that the focus is now on supportive and transitional housing for families and for youth, as well as the full continuum of youth services, which includes the youth intervention space as well as youth shelters. So I want to acknowledge that there are some big changes taking place in the field right now, and so I really want to frame this opportunity this RFP as an opportunity to learn and grow with each other as we begin to get more sophisticated around how our community is tackling the issue of homelessness. So coordinated entry will still be a relatively new process when the funding cycle begins, and so I encourage all programs in your proposals, please be clear about the target population that your program is serving, and if you anticipate that the coordinated entry process is going to impact that population, please make sure to spell this out succinctly and accurately. And for some outer ring and suburb areas, coordinated entry may not be necessarily in place, or there may be different kind of levels that different areas are at with coordinated assessment. So in this case, we want to be flexible and work with programs to figure out and understand the best approach to serve the clients and the needs that they're seeing, while still opting into the universal intake and assessment system as much as possible. So we'd like to be in conversation about that, but you should note that if that's your case. And really, I see coordinated entry as a really exciting opportunity for us as a community to get a baseline around who we're serving in housing programs and to what extent we're serving, and really an opportunity to identify gaps in needs and services. So it's a neat thing, and ultimately we're all striving toward common outcomes. So you'll see I want to turn your attention to page 15 in the RFP packet, that the outcomes will look different in this funding cycle, this upcoming funding cycle, from the current, or the last funding cycle. So just to highlight how foundational stability, access to resources, and self-three kind of universal outcomes looks in the housing space. Foundational stability really includes, you'll see this table that has kind of the 3 columns toward the edge of the table, where you'll see it's been divided out by supportive housing for families and for youth. So the way that you're going to read that table is that if you're a youth services provider, it's going to be the number of youth served in the program, the number of families and youth, the number of youth new to the program. If you're a program that is specifically on families, the way you'll those indicators is the number of families served in the program, the number of families that are new to the program, so et cetera, et cetera. So just to make that clear that we recognize that these are still two distinct service areas: supportive housing for families, supportive housing for youth, but we've lumped them together in that category because we are requiring the same outcomes for both program types. So access to resources is in the housing space, basically really is trying to look at how people are maintaining or increasing their income through either benefits or through employment. And then in the youth space, this is more, the indicator is centered around youth being connected to resources. That's how that kind of plays out. And then self-efficacy is really indicators that are trying to capture the work that your programs are already doing, but it's not kind of visible or not very much stated, and so we're trying to kind of draw out those pieces that deal with getting families and youth to achieve some type of personal transformation while they're in the program. So the way that we've identified indicators around this are families and youth that develop positive relationships, families and youth that demonstrate positive behaviors, and families and youth that make progress on a self-defined goal. So this is something, again, very new from the last funding round, but something that should be hopefully putting a name and a category to some of the work that you all are already doing. My last couple of comments is to be clear about your intake process and how it works and how people receive service in the program. So for example, what length of time it takes for people to find housing, the frequency of meetings with case managers. We want you to basically be thorough but concise. And finally, bring your passion to the table. You and your staff are committed to serving people every day, and we're committed to investing in good work in the community, and so we want you to bring that lens as you approach your proposal. Thank you. So now I'll turn it over to Amy. Oh, yes. Thank you, Amy, for the reminder. I'll open it up to questions for folks that ask questions about housing programs. Yes.
I'm just curious about how United Way is defining homelessness.
Yeah.
Is housing instability, where a family may have been unstable for months and is imminently homeless. Without some sort of support, they will be homeless. Is that homelessness for United Way?
So homelessness for United Way is this more along the lines of the state definition, which is more so kind of the literal homeless, but takes into account the folks who are doubled up and who may be living in unintended places that are unintended for human habitation. So really, like, no roofs over their heads. But thank you for the question. Yeah. Yes.
I apologize if this is a wrong question. You said you won't fund market rate. Does that also mean scattered site TLPs that would be, no?
No. So market rate is our kind of internal term to refer to rapid rehousing programs. That's the service delivery model that we're shifting away from for this funding cycle. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, great. I'll hand it over to Amy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk about our hunger relief goal as well as our domestic violence goal area. And I just want to start with to say that within the hunger space, we are going to be investing in programs that are evidence-based strategies, specifically related to accessing healthy food through our network of providers. And we're going to be funding specifically food shelves and meal programs within this multi-year RFP. For food banks, we're going to be actually working with them to provide funding with a separate kind of activity of funding. But just know that those that are eligible for this particular goal area are going to be food shelves and meal programs. So I just want to start by defining what we mean by food shelf and what we mean by meal program. And these definitions are actually based on Feeding America's definitions. What we mean by food shelf is basically specific services that distribute free food and is operated by an agency. What we're finding out there is that there's been a lot of innovation related to how food is being distributed, so that's why I wanted to be very clear on how we're defining food shelves in the emergency food system. And then the meal program is basically kind of the traditional soup kitchen model where prepared meals and snacks are distributed free of charge and for clients, and it's actually on site at a location. So I just want to direct your attention to page 22 in the RFP, and I'm just going to kind of provide high-level overview of what we're looking for in terms of our preferred and core expectations, our preferred approach. Before I dive into that, I just want to say, for those organizations that are actually providing food shelves and meal programs, if you provide both, please know that what we'd like you to do if you're wanting to apply in both areas is to submit 2 separate proposals versus 1. So in the hunger relief space, we're asking you to submit 2 separate proposals if you provide food shelves as well as meal programs. So I just want to note that. So within the foundational stability area, we are, as I mentioned, looking at access to healthy food by promoting healthy food choices. And what you'll see in the RFP is a definition of what kind of activities are included in promoting healthy food choices. So please pay particular attention to how we're defining healthy food choices. We're also looking at, in terms of increasing access to food, ways that you can do that through basically developing new partnerships with food vendors and or the farmers out in their community. So just think about either existing relationships that you could enhance or new relationships that you could be developing to be able to increase access to healthy food. And in the area of access to resources, like previous years, we're going to be asking food shelves and meal programs to provide general information referrals to services and specifically SNAP screening, so the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. We're going to be asking for you to provide services to screen your clients and households related to SNAP. One other area that, in terms of information referrals, what's going to make your program more competitive is if you are providing information referrals that provide more stability for individuals and families. So, for instance, housing assistance or job and training assistance, those type of programs, or even providing SNAP application assistance to be able to kind of help ensure that those that are eligible for SNAP will actually enroll. So those type of activities and those type of referrals are going to provide, it's going to make you more competitive as a program. And then in the area of self-efficacy, this is a unique type of outcome for the hunger relief area. And so what we really wanted to do was to empower programs to define to actually identify their own indicator in the self-efficacy space. We have provided examples in the RFP just to kind of think through. One example would be an indicator you could report on is households that submit the Common Application Form, or CAF, and after the actual screening that you're providing. So that may be an indicator that you may want to consider tracking. But just kind of think about that. We're really wanting to learn from our food shelf and meal programs to understand what self-efficacy looks like in the hunger space. Okay, so I'm going to pause there and ask if there's any questions related to the hunger portion of the RFP before I move on to domestic violence. Yes, Peg. Actually, could you pause for a second? We want to make sure you have a mic.
You had just mentioned the common application form, and I'm just not familiar with this and wondered if you could say more about that.
Oh, absolutely. So the question was, what is the CAF? What is the Common Application Form? This is the application that is the SNAP application. It's called the CAF, but it's actually a multiple service application, so it's more than SNAP. It's actually a number of other federal programs. Yep. Okay, any other questions within the hunger goal area? Okay, I'll move on to domestic violence. In the domestic violence space, we really wanted to take on a holistic approach to serving families that are being impacted by domestic violence. And so those that are eligible to apply are programs that are providing shelter for survivors and their children experiencing domestic violence, along with community advocacy services, and I'll explain to you what we mean by that, and batterer intervention programs. So this is a new kind of way for us to do funding in terms of more of a holistic approach to serving families experiencing domestic violence. Within this area, we're going to ask if you provide more than one of these type of services, the three I just listed, please just submit one application, because we understand within domestic violence space that there's an overarching program, but you may be serving multiple types of people within the family. So just submit one application if you're providing more than one of the services that I just outlined. I just want to provide clarity in terms of what we mean by community advocacy services. And these would fall, these type of services would be similar to shelter services outside of providing the beds, but they're basically serving adults and children, survivors. It could be prevention or intervention type services, 24-hour hotline, one-on-one advocacy, therapeutic services. So just pay particular attention. We do have a definition in the RFP of what we mean by community advocacy services. I also included within the RFP how we define within the public health lens prevention. So please pay particular attention on how that's defined within that public health lens, because those type of services can also be folded into your RFP request. And then I'm just going to highlight really briefly what our kind of core requirements or expectations are and what's going to make you more competitive within this area. Under foundational stability, we're really focusing on increasing safety to address trauma. And we're going to ask, as we have in the past, for clients to be completing safety plans. That would be adult survivors as well as children. And then for those programs that are actually serving batterers, we're going to ask for you to have them complete prevention plans, violence prevention plans. And we are really wanting to learn from all of you in terms of what your violence prevention plans look like, because there's really no standard kind of template for that, but would love to learn more about what you're doing related to that. And then lastly is that this particular RFP is emphasizing trauma-informed practices, and so you're going to be more competitive, and also it's a core requirement to be enhancing trauma-informed practices, and it's basically as defined by your organization, because we recognize that organizations are at varying levels of implementing trauma-informed care. And then in the area of self-efficacy, access to resources, we're going to ask for you to be providing connections to information referrals, which all of you do within the domestic violence field anyways, and that clients and survivors as well as batterers are learning knowledge and skills to increase their financial resources. And by financial resources, we've defined that as well in the RFP. We're really wanting to understand what kind of services and information referrals you're providing to help, especially survivors, be able to secure housing, because we know that's a challenge, as well as jobs. And then lastly, in the area of self-efficacy, we're going to be focusing on survivors having a positive support system, as well as making progress towards self-defined goals. So we wanted to make the self-defined goal broad enough so that clients are empowered to be able to be defining their own goals, as well to ensure safety ultimately. And then the last point I just want to make is that under our preferred approach area, we are asking programs, it's going to make programs more competitive. If you're working on system level type approaches to addressing domestic violence, specifically we provide examples of what that means. Training county attorneys, training the police departments on being more sensitive to those that are survivors of domestic violence, or even on a public policy level, advocating for specific policies or whatnot that support survivors. So with that, I'll take a pause and ask if there's any questions within the domestic violence area. Okay, if you could hold up. Sam's going to bring a microphone.
Will you fund services to youth survivors of violence in shelters and community advocacy?
Yes, so the question is, well, I think you heard the question because we have a mic, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we will be basically funding survivors, whether they're adults or young people, both, yes.
If a program offers services for domestic violence survivors and transitional housing for people upon exiting shelter, is that a separate proposal under the first housing? The transitional housing portion would be separate under the housing component, and then shelter services would be a proposal under this category?
Yes, I would say that they're two separate proposals. I think it's a huge bonus, however, that your domestic violence survivors are able to transfer into transitional housing. So I would link them too, but yeah, they're separate applications, yes. Right over here.
Are you looking for particular types of innovation in batterer intervention programs, something that would go beyond court-mandated programs?
Very good question. So what we've stated in batterer intervention programs is that we're looking for, in terms of standards, we're really looking for you to use promising practices, and we're quite honestly wanting to learn from our funded partners to see what promising practices look like for batterer intervention services. So I would just encourage you to just kind of tell your story in terms of how your batterer intervention programs are incorporating sometimes promising practices. I would frame it that way. I would encourage you to frame it that way. Any other questions? Oh, right over here.
Oh, hello. Hi. Thank you. This is, I think, related to the batterer intervention question, but what about batterer prevention? What about other types of kind of men's work with teens, young men, youth work, that kind of thing?
So the way we define prevention is in the RFP, primary, secondary, and tertiary. And some of that is really about, when you look at secondary and tertiary, it's really about educating individuals and or groups about healthy relationships, kind of anti-bullying type curriculum, that kind of thing. So who you're serving within those may be either survivors and or could potentially be batterers. Did I see one other hand? Yes.
Yeah, we currently have 3 programs, funded through United Way. So with this new, so they'd all be in one together, but do you break them out in separate budgets, or is it all just kind of?
Yeah. In your case, you will be submitting one proposal, and basically your batterer intervention and your survivor programs are going to be all together in one proposal. Okay? Okay, we're going to move on to Optimal Health, and I'm going to pass the ball over to Megan.
Okay. So there's just a few points I want to highlight here in the area of optimal health. So first of all, programs, eligible programs must be providing primary medical, behavioral, and oral health care, and that can either be a program can do all 3 themselves, or a program can partner with other organizations and other programs to fill those sort of 3 pieces. And the thing I sort of want to highlight is if this work is being done through a partnership, we really want to understand what that partnership looks like. So be sure to give us sort of some detail around the strength of the partnership, how the partnership sort of works, so we really understand the relationship, that those 3 sort of pieces of service delivery, how they sort of roll up into one sort of comprehensive set of services for patients. The second point is around care coordination. So care coordination is a key piece of this strategy, and eligible organizations will be asked to provide care coordination. I know many of you are already doing care coordination, so again, this is a place I just want to highlight to be specific and talk about what your care coordinating program looks like. So how are you connecting patients to resources? How are you staying engaged with patients when they're not when they're not at your program, when they're getting services somewhere else? How are you segmenting your patient population between high risk and low risk? All those sort of things are really important for us to be able to really evaluate effectively what your program is doing around care coordination. Number 3, this is highlighted in the RFP, but providing culturally appropriate care is really a big piece here. So how is your program or your clinic operating in a way that is responsive to the population that you're serving? And then I want to just make a point for those of you who have been funded by us in the past. You may notice that we're not funding health insurance enrollment as a sort of a separate program anymore. What we are doing is we're expecting in eligible programs to have some sort of patient navigation, and this could include insurance enrollment, help connecting to the right resources within their model. So it's not a standalone anymore, but it's certainly, we sort of expect it to be rolled in to your program services, either that you're providing or through the partnerships. And the last piece is this is a program eligibility point. So for any health organizations that have been, or health programs that have been in operation for less than 2 years, you're going to get a sort of an exception here in terms of the program eligibility that I talked about earlier, because we know with ACA and things like that, we have some new programs that have cropped up, and we want to sort of recognize that. So the thing I want to say is if that's you, if your program, so this is not organization, this is if your program has been in operation for less than 2 years, we want to make sure that the model you're using has been successful elsewhere. That's going to be sort of what we're looking at. So if this is you, just be sure that you're really clear and right about why the program model that you're applying with has proven success in other places. Any questions? All right, moving on. There we go. Thank you. Independence. Okay, so for senior people with disabilities maximizing their independence, I just have a few highlights that I want to pull out. So number 1, the way United Way really looks at this area and what we're thinking about in terms of the investments we make are around 2 pieces. One is choice. So that's thinking about strategies that are allowing people to decide how and where they want to live their life. And then the second one is cost. So strategies that are keeping older adults and people with disabilities from either from sliding into poverty, or if they're already at that poverty level, from moving deeper into poverty. So just keep those 2 kind of high-level ideas in mind when you think about how you're applying in this area. So the second thing is, we will likely fund a lot of different strategies under this area. There's a lot of different ways this work is being done in terms of maximizing the independence of these populations. And I understand that as a field, there isn't always common sort of and standard ways to measure the indicators that we're asking you to look at. But I want to make a point that, to the extent possible, we're really looking to see programs use a data-driven approach to understand their program success, and that includes the way that you're measuring your outcomes and indicators. And I'll actually make that point for all of our goal areas. I mean, I think United Way is really taking a look at how data and evidence is influencing and driving the strategies that we're funding. And so to the extent possible, I just want to encourage everyone to highlight work that you're doing around that, whether it's in how you decide what your program strategies are going to be, what models you're using, and then really in how you measure success in your program. And then the third piece here, this is another sort of exception to the program eligibility that I talked about at the beginning. So United Way and the vast majority of programs that we invest in will be serving populations at that 200% of poverty line or below. In independence, we really recognize that, especially with older adults, there's a real problem and risk issue for the middle, sort of that middle income group of seniors in terms of either having to spend down assets to access medical assistance, or just because of the unbelievably huge costs of care to keep them independent, that they very easily slide into poverty. So we're making a slight exception. If you're one of those programs that just because of the strategies that you're using, especially around caregiver strategies, if you find that you have some folks above that 200% line, that's okay. That's okay. It's not going to mean you're not eligible, but we want you to write about why, by focusing on that group or partially focusing on that group, you're helping people avoid that slide into poverty. So that connection, if you're one of those folks that has some of those people in that above 200, just make sure you're making that connection by why the strategy is making a difference in keeping those people from sliding further into poverty. And then finally, I'll say for this area, I said it before, there's a lot of different strategies. They have to connect to the outcomes that we're looking to see, and again, that goes for all areas. Any questions on independence? Yes.
So in the indicators, how are you defining community-based settings?
So we'll define it the way it is defined by the home and community-based, how it flows down from Medicaid in terms of the waiver programs. Does that answer your question? We can talk later. Yeah, I'm certainly can give a more sort of technical answer. Yeah.
I feel like I'm waffling a little bit with the health care coordination piece and the senior piece of we have an intensive care coordination program to help elders who are, there's a hole in the safety net in getting them services that are showing up in shelters and transitional housing. And so it's just a really intensive care coordination process, healthcare as well as housing issues. And I'm not sure where that would best fit because they're all 62 or older, I mean 80-year-olds. It's not just a normal care coordination or housing issue.
Why don't we chat after, since it's sort of a specific program question. And for any of you that have sort of the same sort of issues, I mean, so obviously part of our reasoning for pulling together all these programs under a safety net is because we get that it's never just housing, it's never just health, it's never, you know, it's not one of these things, that many of you are working across the spectrum. Where we are now in terms of how we can sort of invest dollars is still a little siloed, frankly. So if you're waffling, talk to me, talk to sort of any of the program managers in the room, and they can help give you guidance. But know that I think one of our goals moving forward is to figure out how we can do more holistic funding and find easier ways to meet the real needs that you're seeing on the ground. Sorry, just 1 second, let's give you a mic, sorry. For the people on the webinar.
You talked about the importance of connecting strategy to outcome. And in the language you're going to use on the application, does your approach equal strategy?
Yeah, that's right, yes.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Our organization really focuses on racial disparity. And I'm going to apply in the area of homelessness. And would it behoove me or not behoove me to really weave that into the situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think how you are addressing diversity and how your program approach applies to the population you're serving is very important. So, yeah, I mean, I think for everybody, I mean, to me, that's sort of how are your services and how is your approach matching up with the needs of your population? So, yes. Okay, moving on. Legal services. So this is a new way for United Way to invest in legal services within the community. I think I said this at the beginning, but previously legal services have really been sort of embedded in other goal areas. And because of that, we're sort of restricted to the outcomes that we were looking for a specific goal area. So while a legal aid organization may be getting a lot of demand across the safety net, we were really just asking them to only report on domestic violence or only report on you know, some of our independence indicators. So that is one of the reasons we've decided to pull out legal services and fund it as its own sort of goal or impact area. And the other reason is really we know the need is great. I mean, we know that the ability to access free legal aid for low-income populations is a huge piece in terms of how they're able to get out of crisis and get stable. And we, you know, frankly, we want to have a more of a targeted approach in terms of those investments. So there's a few kind of technical eligibility things that I'm going to walk through here for legal services because we are making some differentiations. And so the first big thing, so this area is for organizations who do legal aid or legal assistance as their main mission. Okay, so there's many, I'm going to use Volunteers of America as an example. They have a legal program for seniors within a full range of many, many other services at their organization. They would not apply here. They would, if they would like to, roll that legal within their independence application. Okay, so for those of you that do legal services within sort of a range of other multi-services, if appropriate, you can put that legal work in your application, in your specific goal area, but you wouldn't apply here. This is really just for organizations that only focus on legal aid and legal assistance. Is that clear? Good, okay. So next, within that legal aid world, there's going to be two types of organizations that we invest in. One are folks that are doing direct legal assistance, so that's going to look like attorney-client representation, that sort of thing. And then we are also going to invest in organizations that are focused on legal assistance in terms of building the field, so increasing the number of pro bono hours, increasing the availability of legal services. They'll be asked to measure the same outcomes as those doing direct assistance, but those are the sort of two types of legal aid organizations that we're applying, that we'll be investing in. The other key points here are we'll only be funding civil legal aid, so we will not fund criminal legal services. And then I just want to be clear for organizations applying in this area, they can be providing services in any of the 5 goal areas and beyond. So they're not going to be restricted to just, you know, just one goal area. And then finally, I'll just reiterate, beyond, so the majority of this work will focus on the one-on-one client attorney services. So that can be consultation, that can be an extended representation case, but just to make the distinction, we wouldn't sort of like group legal classes or legal referrals, things like that, under this area. Any questions? No? Okay. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Amy. This is the fun stuff, demographics.
Okay, demographic form. I just want to note that for those that are familiar with our demographic form, we have made a few tweaks. And for those that are new, this will be all brand new information for you. So I want to start by explaining what the columns mean. And what we're looking for in terms of time frame is that we're looking for a full year, 12 months of your program year. And so if you look at the far left column, we're looking for a full 12 months of your most recent completed program year. The center column is your current program year, again 12 months of data. And the far right column is your next program year. And one thing I want to emphasize is that your program year is defined by your organization. So that some programs may be on the same schedule as your organization's fiscal year, or some may not. So just keep in mind that we're asking you, for all of you, to define your program year. The other piece to keep in mind is that the demographic form, the program, as you define program year, should align with your program budget as well as the full year of data that you're reporting on within the indicator section. So those time frames should be consistent. They should be consistent throughout. And then lastly, if specifically your program year starts July through June, for programs on a July through June basis, please use the time frame of July 1st, 2013 through June 30th, 2014 as your most recent completed program year, so the far left column. So those are the years that you'd be starting with. Let me just pause for a second and ask if there's any questions about defining program year. Okay, if you could just, we're bringing a mic to you. Thank you.
Sorry, this wasn't quite program year, but we are serving a certain number of people now, but we're planning on asking for coverage for more people. Do we report on those more people? And so where do we break it off? Do we report who we're currently serving and then who we hope to serve?
So it depends on how your organization defines program year. So when the start of your program year is and when it ends. So depending on when you start your program year and when it ends, you would be tracking the total number of individuals served within that 12-month period of time. So, yep, absolutely, Megan. Yep.
So when you're thinking, if you're thinking of program expansion, right? I think in next program year is if you're projecting, that's where you would put those projections, and then they would, whatever portion of that projected expansion would then feed into where you fill out what you think you can do for each indicator.
Yes, that's correct. But I would also add that if you're reporting on if your current program year is this year and you're looking at expanding this year, then depending on how many additional clients you're going to be serving, just project out what that total would look like by the end of your program year this year under the current program year column. If we can get a mic right here, thank you.
What will the program year be for reporting when we come to reporting?
So as I was stating, reporting is going to be reflective in all three columns. So during the annual report time period, your first for the first annual report after when this grant period starts. This grant period starts July 1st, 2016. Whatever you're projecting under next program year, that's what you'll be reporting at this next annual report for this grant.
So that the funding year may be July 1 to June 30, but our program year may not match that. It will be whatever we define both for the proposal and for reporting.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Right over here, please.
Just to clarify, current program year, you want year-to-date actuals plus projected, I'm assuming, not just year-to-date.
Yes. The three columns are most recent completed program year, current program, and next program year. So there's the current, the previous, and the next program year.
Right. So yes. Right now I look at, excuse me, this is how many people we've served year to date, and we anticipate in the next 6 months it's going to be this number. That's the number total you're looking for.
For if you're currently, if you're referring to the current program year, yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right behind.
So this kind of goes off of her question, is that if the grant period is going to start July 1st of 2016, our first report on the grant would not be until June of the following year, or will you be asking for a 6-month report and then?
Very good question. I want to make sure, I want to ask Megan to answer that question. Thank you.
So you're asking, so everything on this application, whether it's the demographic, the budget, or where you fill in your indicators, should be for 12 months for a full year of data. If you're funded, there is going to be some prorating based on just the time frame. We're going to do 6 months for the first part and then get you on a year schedule, but let's worry about prorating and figuring that out later.
Okay, any other, oh yes, right back here please. Thank you.
we submitted under the families and children last year, and this came up with the demographics, so I want to clarify here. If we have a subpopulation, our population is our main client base, that's what we're reporting, and not if they happen to have, say, family members who are also serving. So if our primary focus is, say, youth, we wouldn't also be reporting on parents that are served as ancillary population, correct? It's just a primary client?
Yes, actually, that was going to be my next point. So when we look at individuals served, the total number of individuals served, which is the first row, what we're asking is for you to report on the total number of participants that you serve within your program, and it's as defined by the program. So for instance, in a food shelf, I'm just going to provide kind of an easy, tangible example. In a food shelf, if one person is coming into the food shelf and requesting groceries, and that one person takes enough food for the entire number of people in the household, the program has the option to track number of individuals served based on the number of individuals that they served within the household. So if there's a family, a mom and a father, for instance, with 2 children, then they may be tracking 4 individuals or participants that they serve because they provided services and enough food for 4 individuals. So the total number of individuals served is based on how you define the number of participants that you're serving within your respective program. Does that make sense? Can we have a mic right over here, please?
And do you want duplicated or unduplicated for that reporting?
Yes, so the demographic form has always been unduplicated counts, unduplicated, yes, unduplicated counts. There may be some exception in some of the indicator counts, specifically in hunger relief. We are asking for the total number of visits, which would be more of a duplicative count because we want to see both a duplicated count and unduplicated. But for the purposes of the demographic form, it's unduplicated counts. Okay. Was there another question? I heard a little murmur there. Okay. So let me just kind of go through on a very high level, kind of actually highlight some of what we're asking for in terms of demographics. I've talked about number of individuals served. Under the gender category, we've added transgender, so please note that. And as we scroll down here, age is pretty self-explanatory. That's slightly changed, I believe, in terms of categories. Just please note that under race and ethnicity, we're really aligning more with census categories, and so we've added 2+ races and separated ethnicity from race. And then with the geographic information, just please note that for Hennepin and Ramsey County, we're asking you to separate Minneapolis, urban core, from suburban. And that would apply as well to Ramsey County. So we serve a 9-county region. We also recognize that you're serving clients within other counties outside of our service area. That's why we have other county as a option. So all of this demographic form up to this point should be reflective of the total number of participants that you're serving. Okay? The only category or section of the demographic form that reflects households served would be the income section. And we break it down into 3 separate categories of income based on the federal poverty guidelines. So just note that we do below 100% of poverty, between 100 and 200%, and above 200% of poverty. We recognize, we have a target population of at or below 200% of poverty. We recognize that you're going to be serving, within that scope, but also perhaps above 200% of poverty. That's why we have the above 200% of poverty as an option as well, because we want you to report total number of participants and households that you're serving within your program, and get that broader, look at who you're actually serving. So we want to, even though we have a target population, we want to be able to see that full picture. And just note also under the income section that if you're wanting to use, and this has oftentimes been done, using government programs as a proxy to determine where an individual or participant fits into the income category, that's a really smart way of being able to actually determine, and even asking the question at intake. Okay, I'm going to pause there. I want to ask if there's any further questions, because I know that this this form in the budget can be a little bit more time intensive in completing. So just want to pause and ask if you have any other questions. Mike.
This kind of feels like a radio call-in show. On the far right column, where we're proposing good faith estimates, if you will, this may be kind of thinking down the road, but this is about the 7,000th time through these proposals for me personally. So when we have our estimated next program year, will we have to report discrepancies between the actuals against our good faith estimates?
Yes. Yeah, so during our annual reports, and this is especially a great question for those that have never received United Way funding, is that we ask, as you're completing the RFP, you're giving us estimates under the next program year, and for some of you, current program year. So we really, when we ask for the demographic form to be completed at the time of the annual report, we're asking for the results, and we will ask you to report any discrepancies between what your targets were as well as what your results are. This applies to the demographic form, it applies to the program budget, it applies to the indicator section as well.
And I'll just add on to that, Amy. So, you know, if your program is funded, there's going to be another step here where we really negotiate the final numbers in a contract, and that's going to be the baseline for what your annual reporting is on. So this is, think of this as sort of the proposal and application where you're doing your best to tell us what you can do. But this isn't necessarily going to be what comes out in the wash once everything is said and done. Does that make sense?
Okay, any other questions? I have right over here in the back.
Well, I'm just noticing that I'm glad you've added transgender there, but it's not actually in the RFP itself.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
I'm kind of wondering what, you've got male, female, transgender, other, and gender unknown. What does it say under other there?
It says client gender identity not listed above. Okay. So we did add transgender more recently after we printed the RPs, and it's been changed on the online application. Yes, thank you. Yes, right over here.
There's bonus points in the application for non-urban.
Yeah. So Megan's actually going to talk about that, but let me just really brief you. What we're really looking for, because we serve a 9-county area, is that as we're looking at scoring each proposal, we're looking at services, programs that actually serve outside of Ramsey and Hennepin County will receive bonus points. And so Megan will provide a little bit more clarity on what the bonus points look like, but that's kind of that's it in a nutshell. Yes, Patricia, welcome back.
Over the years, we've worked really hard to reduce the unknown numbers. Do you want to talk about that as far as what the expectation is for demographics on that?
Great question. So we recognize that the demographic, collecting demographic client data can be challenging, you know, having to revise your database and update that and such, and not wanting to be so intrusive, you know, obviously when you're working with clients. And so we just ask that you do the best you can. We will ask if, you know, during the annual reports, as we're reviewing your annual report, if there's a very, very large number of unknowns in a specific category on the demographic form, we'll ask you to kind of help us understand what that's about, and if there's, you know, if you are having data collection challenges, we'd want to work with you on what are some strategies that, you know, could maybe help benefit collecting more accurate numbers. But the bottom line is that we really want you to just do the best you can and have as much accuracy as you possibly can on the demographic form. But we know it's not going to be 100% perfect. The last piece I just want to add before Megan talks about budget is that we recognize that the total number of participants you're serving within, you know, that you're reporting on the demographic form may be larger or higher than what you're identifying as targets in your indicator section, because not all participants are going to achieve, you know, all the indicators 100%. So just know that it's okay if you're reporting higher numbers on your demographic form in terms of individuals served or participants served. and that may not look identical to what you're reporting in your indicator section. There's one question over here, please.
I'm sorry if you've already covered this, but is this only for populations of 200% of poverty and less?
No. So what I was trying to reiterate was, very good question. Thanks for asking again. Is that this particular demographic form should reflect all the participants within the program that you're applying for, and we recognize, our target population is at or below 200% of poverty, but we want you to report all the participants you're serving, and so that's why we have above 200% of poverty. We have other counties, we have other categories so you can reflect the full breadth of who you're serving. Okay, I'm going to pass it on to Megan, who's going to talk about our budget section.
Okay. Thank you. Great. All right. Hello. Okay, so I'm just going to reiterate because how we're thinking about time frames here, because I know it's a little confusing, but I'll reiterate what Amy said. So first, let me say this is for your program budget only. This is not for your agency budget. There's going to be a separate part of this process where you upload organizational or agency budgets. This is just for the program you're applying for. And let me just ask quickly, how many folks have their program year is on a different sort of time frame than their agency year? Okay, great. So you can think of this as your fiscal year. You can think of it as your program year. The important thing here is we want 3 full years of data, right? Your last year, your current year, and then your projected next year. And this is however your program defines program year. January to December, July to June, what's the other one? It's October to September, whatever it is. It doesn't have to align with our grant year. This is however you're defining your program year. Okay, and Amy made this point, but I'll make it again. For you, those of you on July to June, because we're literally in the, if we had this conversation in 2 weeks, you'd be in your next fiscal year. For those of you on a July to June cycle, for most recently completed program year, we want to see July 1, 2013 to June 30th, 2014, because that's going to give us your best sort of closed out budget. All right, so on to the budget. Oh, yeah, please.
Under program staffing, when you say next fiscal year budget and you're counting people, are you assuming you're getting the funding? Is that?
Yeah, so it's just as if you were to do your budget for next year, what you think. And let me also make the point, we've made some updates since to the online version, which is what you're seeing since we've printed these. So what you're looking at this fiscal year, we've updated it to program year for clarity, but just know that for all changes, that is going to be the most up-to-date place. And any material changes, just so you know, will be highlighted in the FAQs that we're posting online, so you'll know if something changes. Okay, so I just want to highlight a few pieces here in terms of the budget. So I'm going to go down to program revenue. So we ask you here to do some breaking out of your revenue streams for this program. So these are dollars that are going towards your program. And the 2 pieces I just want to highlight, if you are currently receiving Greater Twin Cities United Way funding, it goes in this first line. And we just want to be clear, this is where you put your multi-year grant, if you have one. You don't put any, if you have initiative dollars, if you have a strategic planning grant, all of that, we don't want to see that here. This is just the multi-year grant that if you have one, you would put that in the top line. And then the next program year budget is going to be, essentially what your ask is for this upcoming application. Okay, and then underneath, I just want to be really clear. Some of you may have money from other Minnesota United Ways. If that's the case, that's where it goes. Don't lump those 2 together. Great. Scrolling down, we do ask for your in-kind contributions. So for those of you that get a lot of, for example, some of the food programs might be getting a lot of donated food. Some of you might have a lot of volunteers that you're working with that translate to in-kind dollars on your budget. We want to get a sense of that. Let me just say, this should just be pulled off of your budget. I don't want anyone running around trying to calculate like the donation of baby clothes that they got, last week and what's the market value. If this is being tracked, you should, most of you, if you have in kind, it should be tracked in your budget already. That should be part of how you're doing your financials. Pull that line off and put it here. And then just this is also where, if you have a lot of volunteers, which again, that they're sort of financial, what they sort of are in your budget, that's also where this would go. Any questions? Okay. So we ask you to break out even further 2 specific types of revenue, and so that is foundation and corporate sources of revenue, and then government grants or contracts. So this is only for grants or contracts that are $50,000 or more, okay? So anything under that, you don't have to put here, and of that $50,000 or more, we only need your top 5. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory. This is for your current funding year, right? So that's sort of the time frame you're reporting on here for your current year, 50 grand and above, and then just tell us if it's book dollars, if it's pledged, sort of what the status is, so we get a sense there. All right. Moving down to program expenses, this should be pretty clear cut. We talked about the time frame already up top. The only other thing I'll say is this looks down here, this looks just like a little box for explaining anything in the budget, but it'll take more than, it'll take as much sort of narrative you want to write. I want to encourage folks to use this box to explain anything that you think we should know. So certainly, if you have things in the other category, tell us what they are there. But don't be afraid to use this as a budget narrative. Don't write a book, be concise, but anything that it would be good for us to know. I'm thinking specifically things like if you have a earned income or program fee expenses, some explanation there is really helpful. If you have a high consultant line, that is always helpful. Any line that's kind of high or maybe like just oddly low, it's better to give some explanation than just assume that we'll figure it out. Questions on the program budget form? Yes, in the back.
So I just want to clarify here with the top foundation sources and the top government grant sources, that's only for the program. If you're in a multi-service organization, you don't want the, and if you have like a Gen Op support grant,
I would say if it's booked specifically to your program, and talk to your finance people, but if it's booked to your program, let's see it. If it's like a Gen Ops grant that gets allocated to everybody, don't put it here.
We're not talking about government contracts, we're only talking about the grants.
Grants and or contracts, but if you're like reimbursing, if it's something, if you have a contract and you're reimbursing, so it's not coming down to you in a lump sum, you wouldn't put that here.
Because I mean, in the budget income, you distinguish between contracts and grants.
Right.
So, but here it's not.
It's grants and or contracts.
Okay, thank you.
Down in front.
Who was it? Sorry.
It's just to piggyback off what you said, just for a point of clarity. Yeah. So you were saying that if it's federal funding or grants of that nature, if we're paying in advance and they're reimbursing us, we're not getting a one lump sum, we would not put it on there.
So I would differentiate. So if you're being awarded a contract for a set amount that is $50,000 or over, regardless of how it gets paid out to you, I would list it here. If you, for example, this might, if you're billing Medicaid or if you're billing a waiver program and it's just sort of an ongoing whatever you bill, it doesn't go here. Is that clear? Yeah? Okay.
So I'm thinking of our cost center for
basic needs, and it's got both food shelf and all of these numbers, and then we've also got some government contracts and other funding sources included. So I'm wondering how much you want, again, this kind of big picture of what, say, this cost center looks like, or how much you want specifically to the program that we're applying for.
So I'm going to leave it to you to make that decision, but I would say the reason we care is because we want a little bit of detail on the diversification of revenue that we're looking at for this program. Okay, so I might advise think more program, even if you have a broad cost center for safety needs. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. We're almost there. So I just want to say a few words. So 211 is United Way's information referral service. It's our only sort of direct service that Greater Twin City United Way operates, and it's a 24/7 information referral call center that connects people to resources across the whole state. I think it's a really important service, and we've been thinking about how we can make it more robust for you guys. So a lot of you have clients that use 211. A lot of you have staff, case managers, care coordinators, et cetera, that use 211, and we want to start thinking about how we can position 211 to be different ways that it can be a better, more useful service for the work that you're doing. So we're going to run some pilots. And the way this is going to work is on your application, there's going to be a box that says, I opt in to participate in a 211 pilot. It has zero bearing on your application. I swear to God, it will have nothing. If you check it or don't check it, it does not matter in terms of how your application is scored. And really, we want people to check it that are thinking to themselves, yeah, like it would be really great if 211 could do this, or if I could access this part of data in a different way to help to help the way my program runs. So if you're one of those organizations or programs that are thinking like that, please check opt-in. Once all of this grant cycle is done and we've made the awards and we've closed out all the contracts, we're going to look at that list. We have some funding to work with. I think it's around 20 to 25 programs. So we'll see what we sort of get in terms of interest. But the idea right now is to work with the program and through 211 to sort of create a kind of custom way for your organization to use 211. So we'll be working with the center. You'd be looking at there are different ways to access data. There's sort of a host of different sort of forms this could take. So at this point, I just want to tell you about what our sort of future plans are. If you think it's something you might be interested in, please check the box on the application, and then just know in about a year, maybe a little less, we might start having some of these more in-depth conversations around what a 211 pilot might look like at your organization. Any questions? Yeah.
Do you guys have any sense of time, of how much time that would entail, taking away program staff?
No idea. And so that will be based on, you can take it.
Yeah, sorry. We're going to take the brunt of the work on this. So we have a robust 211 staff. Katie Jarek, who's not here today, is our director of this work. So we'll make it as low of an impact as possible on the organizations and include organizations in the planning of this also. So stay tuned. We just think there's a lot of data here that we're not using to the full potential, and there's a lot of opportunity to really partner in different ways that evolve this work. So as much as possible, though, we'll take the bulk of the work on here at United Way with the 211 staff. Good question. Thank you. All right, so not many people have left the room, which is a good thing. So thanks for staying with us. A lot of information this morning. So how do we make the funding decisions here at Greater Twin Cities United Way? Once you hit the submit button on July 16th, we will take all of the proposals into consideration. Every proposal that comes in the door gets a full review by staff and by expert volunteers. Once we review those proposals, a set number move forward based on quality and ability to impact results, move forward to a site visit.
Not every proposal moves forward into site visit mode for a lot of reasons. We score the proposals using a research and evidence-based rubric that we've developed here. Something that's different in this round for those of you that are currently funded, if your proposal does not move forward, we will let you know right away. In the past, if you were currently funded, we would automatically move you regardless of quality of proposal and ability to get impact into a site review as a courtesy. We are no longer doing that. So you will get a call after that proposal comes in if for whatever reason you don't move forward, that it did not move forward, so that you know that your funding will be ending on June 30th of 2016. So I'm just saying that because it's a very different way of us doing business, and that's based on competitiveness, us wanting to get the best impact possible, and also just limited funds. So know that that's a change that we have made within this process. So the old days of United Way funding, because we have been in partnership for 100 years, are really over. We really want to make sure that we're thoughtful about our donors' dollars and how we invest those. Once the proposals move into site visit, you will receive a visit from a United Way staffer plus a volunteer typically. And we come out, and this is really a chance for us to ask any clarifying questions, for us to see the program in action, for us to really kind of dig deeper into the work that you all do. Those are typically about an hour and a half in length. And then bonuses, Megan, do you want to speak quickly to bonuses? Sam is right there with his mic.
Yes, so there are 2 bonus questions in the RFP, as I'm sure you've seen, one around behavioral health services and one around service in the outer counties. They're both, the way the scoring works, if you're eligible for either of those, is however you sort of answer them, you're scored on that bonus point, and whatever sort of point amount you get gets added to your total score. A few things I will say for the behavioral health bonus, I just want to be clear that anyone applying in the optimizing health goal area is not eligible for that bonus, because you already, as an eligibility requirement, need to have behavioral health as part of your model. So just don't feel like you have to check it again. And then for the outer county, the sort of threshold or criteria there, we're looking for folks who are serving people in all 7 counties, so everything but Hennepin and Ramsey, the easiest way to say it. And the threshold is really that you are serving people in those counties. So we would sort of look back to your demographic form to that kind of our check that actually that bonus is, that you checked it correctly.
Questions about the bonuses? And then finally, the funding recommendations approval. Just so that you all have a sense of the approvals here, United Way staff make recommendations to our governance structure here. So we will have a first stop of making the funding recommendations to our safety net committee, which is made up of our board and then experts within the safety net arena. It then goes to the community impact committee, which is a board again and other community experts, and then ultimately goes to our board of directors. So there's a lot of checks and balances along the way in terms of the recommendations that we make to these folks. The board will approve recommendations in March of 2016. So after we complete everything, that's when we'll start making notifications on who receives funding. So the total funds available up to $16 million per year over 3 years. So we're looking at a $16 million investment annually for 3 years. Our typical grant size is around, well, our minimum grant that we're looking for in terms of an application is $50,000. That's per year. So as you're thinking about your program, we would like to keep it at least $50,000 per year as you think about that proposal. And that's based really on the impact that we're hoping to achieve. Our typical grant size here, just to give you kind of a sense of that, is around $125,000 per year. That doesn't mean that that's where this will land and we're splitting it all things equal, but just to give you a sense of where programs typically fall. Some are more, some are less than that. This will be highly competitive. Just to give you a sense of what happened with the education RFP that was launched last year, we had over 200 applications. We had about $31 million worth of requests. We had $13 million to give out. So that just paints the picture of not only the need that we have in our community, but we had to say no to a lot of really quality programs just based on the fact that we did not have enough funding to invest like any other funder. And so I just want to make that clear that we're really looking for the best of the best, the folks who can demonstrate that impact and help us really achieve our goals aligned with our mission. And the staff is really here to talk that through. So as you're crafting the proposal, you're thinking about your program, do not hesitate to call us and ask questions to kind of test things with us to understand, and we will give you an honest answer. Sam's coming up with the mic.
Is the total money you grant allotted evenly among
the different categories, or is it just whatever are the best that come to the top?
So it's not all things equal between all the categories that we talked about. One is we'll see where programs come in and how many requests we have within each area. A good example of this is actually an education or early learning space. We had kind of sketched out the amount that we thought we would invest there. The demand wasn't equal to what we were planning on investing, so we're able to kind of shift those funds. We're looking at that right now. We want to see what comes in, and we want to be able to invest in those strategies where it makes sense. So we'll keep you posted on what that looks like. And then in terms of the timeline, the RFP did come out on Monday. We will have the close of the RFP on Thursday, June 16th at 4 p.m. That is a hard stop. The system does close at that time, so if you don't have it submitted by then, we will not accept the application. I will say that you'll hear this from Tom again as he presents next. Please start your application as soon as possible. We know that there's a lot going on within your organizations, but the sooner you can start that and we can work out any kinks, we really appreciate that. The team is here to help, but we do see often that people wait until that very last minute to submit. Some folks are working offline, we get that, but if it doesn't come in by 4 p.m., we do have a hard stop on that timeline. July through February of 2016 is when we'll be reviewing those proposals and conducting site visits with organizations. Thank you in advance for your flexibility with scheduling on that. We know it's tricky to get all the right people in the room on your side and on our side as well, so appreciate flexibility on that. And as I mentioned, we'll be notifying agencies in March after our board meeting. So once that happens, regardless of whether or not you're funded, you will get a personal phone call and you will get feedback on why you weren't. I know that that's another step that we've taken in terms of really providing feedback to all of you within your proposal. And then funding will begin on July 1 of 2016. So just to be clear, for those of you that are currently funded, your funding will continue through June 30th of 2016, so don't worry about that. And then for those of you that would not move forward for some reason, if you were no longer funded, it would end on June 30th of 2016. Questions about timeline?
I actually have a question about the amount. How does this $15 million with what's current?
Really good question. So on the macro view from United Way's perspective, and then talk a little bit more about safety net. So many of you have heard speak the past couple years about some of the challenges that we're going through as a United Way and as a funder in this community. We raise our money from our corporate partners or from individual partners, and the way that donors are engaging with United Way and the way that companies are engaging with United Way has been changing. And so you've probably heard me say, or you've seen some communications from me, that we've had up to $11 million to cut from our multi-year grants. Now, education took the brunt of that. They just took about a $4.5 million hit. Healthy behaviors is an area that we no longer fund. That was a $2.5 million reduction. And we're looking at this area as about a $4 million reduction from where we currently exist. So previously, roughly, it was about $20 million. It'll be up to $16 million. Not to get too nitty-gritty in the weeds, but the reason why we've aligned with this July 1 date is because the money that we're raising this year gets allocated next year. So we have a good sense by March of 2016, our final numbers of what we raised in the community in 2015. That allows us flexibility and hopefully all of you a little bit of stability in knowing your grant amount each and every year. So it's a little bit tricky in the way that we raise our funds and the way that the community is changing, which I'd be happy to chat with anybody offline in detail about kind of our thinking around that. Good question. Other questions about funding or timeline? Okay, so as I've mentioned and as you've hopefully heard from the team, we want to be able to answer any questions that you have as we move through this process. And so we've set up a couple things to hopefully streamline the way that we're getting questions. So one is email us at grantees@gtcuw.org. This allows us to do a couple things. One, track the questions that are coming in. We have a frequently asked questions document on our website that will be updated weekly. So as you all ask questions, if we're hearing common themes, that will be the place that we update them. So that allows us to track. We'll then be able to send those questions to anyone on the team that can more specifically answer those questions. Or you can call this number, which is a general mailbox for this particular RFP at 612-340-7659. That's another just kind of good stop that we'll check on a regular basis to answer any questions if you don't know who to contact specifically. Tom will talk more about this, but for IT questions, we do have the help desk support at gtcuw.org. or 612-340-7534. That's all your tech needs that you'll have there for us to help answer or navigate. And then, of course, you can all contact me. You can contact Katie Jurek, who is our Director of Operations, who has a really good sense of the overall process and can help navigate that as well, or Megan OMeara, our Director of Safety Net. So if you don't know, if you're not feeling like you're getting an answer, these are good places to go, but you can also email me directly, or Megan or Katie, and we can make sure that you get your questions answered.
So all of you should have a printed copy of some frequently asked questions. Know that as questions come in and we see common questions, we're updating that document online, and we're trying to do an update every week. So if that's just a good sort of check to make in case you have questions in your head to see if anyone else has been asking them. They'd be in the FAQ online.
Any questions in general before we turn it over to Tom, the guru of all things technology here at United Way? No pressure.
Maybe this is a little more technical and past where we are. A lot of the self-efficacy that you're asking for, do you have preferred tools, or what does your research come up with? Like PAM scores, obviously, but you have to pay for PAM, and are there some other alternatives of quality of life assessments?
That's a great question. So we do, so in the RFP in specific goal areas, there are some resources and suggested measures, but you know, this is a place where you as a program can decide what you want to use. And so there's some guidance. I think we always are looking for more evidence-based measurement tools if those exist, but in some of these areas, they may not exist, so we want to hear from you how you plan to measure some of those indicators.
I see that in the review process that you have a scoring rubric that you score applications against. Do you share that with the general public or those that are applying?
We actually do not. So we have had, people have asked us that question for a very long time. You know, the middle ground of what we do there is we share candid feedback on where you excelled as a program and where you did not. So regardless of whether you move forward, so even if we fund you, we do give feedback with the team that we use in site visits and beyond the review process, but we do not share our rubric. All right, Tom.
All right, the exciting part that everyone came for. So exciting that we made a video this year, and we posted it to YouTube, so you can go home and watch it over and over and over. And for our folks who are listening on the webinar, I'm going to run through this slide, and then when we kick over to the video, we gave you the link to the YouTube video. The audio doesn't translate great to the webinar. So before we move over, though, just a few things that I will highlight. And I've mentioned these before for anybody who's been in these trainings before, but we use an Internet Explorer-based tool to build the forms so it works best with Internet Explorer. So if you notice things like strange formatting or the print application is not great, but it's even worse in Chrome, first thing I'd recommend is switching over to Internet Explorer. Things will work best if you're using that one. In addition to starting early, we recommend requesting your access to the link. You do have to go through a sign-up process. It's a little bit of manual work on our end to make sure you're connected to the right organization, seeing the right things. Don't do that last minute. Start a new application, one unique application for each program for which you are requesting funding. This is an online system. Internet connections come and go. Make sure you're saving frequently as you're working. And then one time when your application is fully complete, you've done all your checks, everyone agrees that it's ready to go, hit the submit button, and after that there are no changes allowed. And with that, so again, this is posted to YouTube. If you or other folks in your office need to review this later, feel free to pull it up. This video will provide some additional information on completing an application for the 2015 Strengthening Safety Net RFP.